Hello, everyone. Hola a todos. My name is James Brickson, and I am honored to have been invited to speak to you today about one of the most influential Supreme Court justices of the last 100 years and the first black man appointed to the Supreme Court, Justice Thurgood Marshall. Justice Marshall often said he first came to the law because of his father. He joked that his dad would make him argue every single statement he ever made, even if it was just about the weather. But what he used his law degree for was far less trivial. From graduation onward, he strove to rectify the injustices he saw in the world. One of his first cases involved suing the University of Maryland's law school for its unconstitutional policy denying non-white applicants. The very same public law school, only one in the state, which had denied his admission only a few years prior. 2 decades later, not yet Justice Marshall would argue and win one of the U.S.'s seminal cases, Brown v. Board of Education, effectively desegregating the nation. Throughout his career on the bench, Justice Marshall stood fast in his convictions and applied his clear sense of justice intersectionally. He was a staunch defender of privacy rights, using them to defend women's rights to their bodies and the LGBT community. He staunchly opposed the death penalty due to its disproportionate use against Black Americans. But as a law student, I personally was always most drawn to his dissents. He dissented far more times than he wrote majority opinions because he saw dissents as giving voice to the people and staying silent as unacceptable. He partnered with his friend Justice William Brennan to write over 1,400 dissents just for when the Supreme Court denied to review death penalty cases. He refused to be silent to oppression, and he gave voice to those who were systematically silenced. I came to the law a little bit differently. I didn't really realize I wanted to be a lawyer until my junior year of college, but both of my moms can tell you they knew I was going to be a lawyer the second I could open my mouth and talk. They, of course, had to hear me sass and debate every punishment I was ever given, and there's a pretty long-standing story of me saying, "Sorry to have to tell you, Mama." I was not sorry to have to tell her anything. But also, growing up with 2 moms in the 90s and early 2000s, I found many, many ways to learn how to advocate for myself. I've often joked that if I ever write a memoir, it will be titled, "My Parents Are Gay and So Are You," a play on a phrase I heard from elementary schoolers on the bus every single day. I was lucky. I had friends who supported me, teachers who nurtured that sense of justice in me, and parents who advocated for me, creating a space that was safe enough for me to be loud and proud despite adversity. I turned to the law as a career years later while I was studying abroad. It was 2018, and the media storm on family separation at the US border broke. That's when I finally decided law school's it. That's what we're doing. We're going to go become an immigration lawyer. It's all making sense to me now, and I really wanted to work with unrepresented kids. I am very, very proud to say that 6 years later, I am currently serving a fellowship with the Immigrant Justice Corps with the Immigration Project in Champaign-Urbana as an attorney on their children's representation team. However, I'm only the lawyer I am today because of Circle of the Beloved, a year of service I did in North Minneapolis with the Episcopal Church. I served as First Nations Kitchen's Data and Communications Coordinator, which means that I coordinated all of our weekly community meals, curated all outward-facing media, and came to speak to churches to get them excited to volunteer with us and share our mission. But the most important skill I learned while under Father Bob and Richie Tubles was cultural humility. Through my weekly self-education on Indigenous issues in Minnesota and through sitting down with our guests and breaking bread with them, I learned how to be able to talk to anyone, to listen to their story and find commonalities to mine, to listen and hear those who have had experiences I can never understand, and how to hold space for them and still do the work that I have to do at the end of the day. And these are the lessons I carry on my heart every time I meet with a client, because all of my clients are survivors of trauma. My ability to seek out difficult information while acting with compassion is directly due to my time with Circle of the Beloved. The skills I developed to better understand my Indigenous clients are due to First Nations Kitchen. But Justice Marshall and our readings today remind me that I do this work to help my clients navigate the most confusing, biased, bureaucratic process of their lives to hopefully help them get legal status. To speak truth in the gate and prevent it from being turned into a locked door. At first, I struggled with a lot of Amos in the Psalm. In an era where eat the rich has been memed into oblivion, I really sat there and thought to myself, billionaires are building bunkers in the ground to avoid the apocalypse. What deliverance can we expect? So I called my mom, Dean Cindy Brickson, and I said, Mama, what am I supposed to do with this? And she said, Jimmy, when Amos wrote these passages, it was incredibly good news. People had been living in dark, difficult lives for a really long time, and having this promise from God gave them hope. And the idea of that promise really stuck with me, because in my opinion, we need it just as much today, if not more, than in Amos' time. And so I remembered a different section from Matthew, the latter verses of chapter 24, where Jesus calls us to be ready for God's reign at every hour of every day, for we do not know the hour in which the Lord will come. I found myself asking, what work do we need to do to be prepared for God's promise? And Amos answered my question: establish justice in the gate. Justice Marshall strove to enact just policies in his time on the Supreme Court. He repeatedly spoke truth, no matter its futility. Amos observes, the prudent will stay silent in such a time, for it is an evil time. But Justice Marshall was never prudent. Jesus certainly wasn't. But Amos isn't calling us to be prudent and judicious. He's reminding us that even though evil times push us to be silent, God is calling us to speak truth in the gate. Pairing Amos, the Psalm, and the Gospel, we are being called to recognize the God-given divinity in every human being on this earth, no matter their race, ethnicity, nationality, legal status, creed, political belief, gender, sexuality, ability, or anything else. As Justice Marshall once said, in recognizing the humanity of our fellow human beings, we pay ourselves the highest tribute. We are at our best when practicing radical inclusivity. By breaking bread with every person, no matter how undesirable society has decided to label them. Helping an immigrant family make ends meet before they get their work permit approved. Looking your unhoused neighbor in their eyes and introducing yourself. It can be as little as getting a grilled cheese from All Square in South Minneapolis, a nonprofit that employs formerly incarcerated individuals and has an affiliated law firm that helps them sue the Department of Corrections. Please buy some grilled cheeses. Radical acts are radical no matter their size. A pebble dropped in the ocean makes ripples. Each voice in the gate echoes. This also means not falling prey to false experts. The Pharisees and rabbis in Jesus' time were false leaders and hypocrites, men who preached God's law for the power, but didn't follow it themselves. So, who do you all think of when you hear these passages? For me, and I'm sure many of you, the first to mind were politicians. People who make laws that will never, ever touch them. Who set their own salaries while telling all of us that raising the minimum wage is impracticable. Our representatives need a reminder of their function to speak and act as mouthpieces for their constituents. Throughout the process of writing this sermon, I wondered to myself, what would it look like if we had an empty chair always on the Supreme Court and in both houses of Congress. Not for Elijah or for Moses, but for the people. A monument to symbolize the voices that are not in the room, the voices that are systematically silenced. Would that finally force our modern-day Pharisees to realize that their roles as gatekeepers is not meant to keep people out, but to let people in? Amos condemns those who afflict the righteous, who take a bribe and push aside the needy in the gate. If our government can't be expected to establish justice, then it is up to us. So, get involved in local politics. Say yes to those pesky door knockers if you agree with their mission. If you speak more than one language, volunteer with a social legal service provider for immigrants. Seek out and amplify more diverse voices without demanding or expecting their emotional labor, because there is a Facebook group for that. There are so many ways in which we can make ripples. I have had to remind myself many times in my life that I cannot fix the whole world. I have to choose one aspect and fight it the best that I can. So that's what I do. Every day, I work with my clients as an advocate and a teammate in trying to get them legal status. I encourage and I support them as they tell me their most difficult stories. And then we turn those stories into an application, and then a receipt notice, and then a work permit authorization and a social security number, all the way to citizenship, we hope. And then those kids get to grow up, and they get higher education, and they get to vote. And that is how we turn the tide. Never, ever underestimate the impact of a small act. Then find some and do them. Today, I invite you to consider how the divine is calling us to stand in the gate of God's city. How each of us can speak truth to power and defend the inherent divinity in each human being. To honor the legacy of a man who spent his life advocating for justice by carrying that charge into the present through our own actions. I offer these invitations with gratitude for our time spent together in reflection and in happy anticipation of all of us meeting in the gate. Thank you.